Recently, I was tasked with watching a documentary called Kiss the Ground. This documentary presents the idea that the solution for climate change was under our feet the entire time, or that it was staring at us the entire time. But is that true? Was the solution for climate change really right in front of us all along and we just didn't know? The documentary Kiss the Ground focused on the central themes and concepts of healthy soil, carbon sequestration, and regenerative agriculture. But what even are those things, and how do those things work together to potentially combat or solve climate change? So, we're talking about healthy soil. What does healthy soil mean? When most people think about soil, they're probably not actually thinking about soil. They're probably thinking about dirt. Because if you were to go outside of your work or your house and just start digging in the parking lot, you're probably going to find really dry, dusty, with nothing in it, maybe twigs, dirt. That's not soil. Healthy soil is alive. It contains microbes, fungi, organisms, just little micro beings that serve to have their own little ecosystem in there. And the purpose of a healthy soil is to retain water, cycle nutrients, and grow plants. So we can see in this picture here that this soil has a huge worm in it. It's wet and it's clumpy. That's because it's alive, and this is a live, healthy soil that would serve well to support a plant. So, next off, I'm going to be talking about carbon sequestration, what it is, and why it's so important to maintaining a healthy environment. So, most people know that carbon is the most common greenhouse gas, and it's probably what people think about when they think about climate change is the carbon emissions and how do we get rid of all this carbon that's being put out into the air and into the atmosphere. So, what is carbon sequestration? Carbon sequestration is the process of taking carbon out of the atmosphere and out of the air and storing it in a sink of some sort. We're going to be talking about soil sequestration, but soil is not the only sink that carbon can be stored in. It could also be stored in the ocean. But for the purpose of this assignment, we're going to be talking about soil sequestration. So it is a natural process. It's not something that we have to like man-made and we have to force. It's something that naturally occurs when a plant goes through photosynthesis. So if we have a plant like this, plants absorb CO2 from the air to make carbon-rich leaves and stems and roots. So they take in the carbon and they love it. Now, when they take that carbon in, it's kind of like us breathing air. They breathe in the carbon dioxide, and they release some of it back into the air. When we breathe, we release some oxygen back into the air. But a lot of the carbon will end up stored in the plant and in the roots of the plant. And when you have organisms that live in the soil, since we talked about healthy soil and how it's full of organisms, when they eat the dead leaves and the roots and they're living in the bottom of the soil, they end up storing that carbon underground because they're not coming out of the soil, they live in there. So this is a process that is naturally occurring that serves to take a ton of carbon out of the air and out of the atmosphere. And when they store carbon in the soil, they end up storing it for typically some decades. So this is something that is not short term. This is something that is beneficial and lasts for a decent amount of time. So, finally, what is regenerative agriculture? Regenerative agriculture is basically the culmination of the two prior topics we just talked about healthy soil and carbon sequestration. Regenerative agriculture is essentially what it sounds like it is agriculture that serves to regenerate itself. And with conventional agriculture, people often find that soil health tends to deplete over time instead of getting healthier. As we plant a bunch of crops and we till and we rip up the soil becomes less and less and less healthy due to that agitation, due to the constant work on it. And we have to supplement natural health with chemical fertilizers to maintain the health of our farm. So, regenerative agriculture supports the natural process of soil sequestration. It supports the natural ecosystem of healthy soil, and it restores the health of the soil over time instead of depleting it. It utilizes key aspects such as composting, cover crops, and little to no tilling to avoid soil erosion. By not eroding the soil physically, by scraping into it over and over again, the soil becomes more resistant to natural soil erosion, such as when we water it, the soil doesn't run off and away. And because the soil, since the water is staying where it needs to be, we're reducing water pollutants if we're deciding to use a mixture of fertilizer, and we're improving water retention, which is extremely important for areas such as California, where I live, where drought is a huge problem. Next off, I'm going to be talking about a case study, specifically Gabe Brown's farm in Bismarck, North Dakota. So, in the 1990s, Gabe Brown was a owner of a farm that was struggling. After years of conventional farming, the soil on his farm was degraded. He was finding that the yield of his crop from year to year was becoming inconsistent and that he was heavily reliant on synthetic fertilizers to make up for the lack of health that his soil had. So, he was at a point in his farming career where he had to make a change or he was going to lose his farm. So, he decided to transition from conventional farming to regenerative farming, implementing the key aspects such as no-till planting, composting, cover crops, and rotational grazing, implementing the livestock that you can see in the photo into the farming process. And he found that not only did it make a healthier farm that was better for the environment, he also found that this change was profitable, cutting the costs and increasing the resilience to drought and other problems that farms tend to have.
We're not in this to make the most profit this year. We're in it to regenerate our soils and long-term profitability. And because we've gone to this type of a production model, we're able to produce our cash commodities at a fraction of the cost.
So some statistical analysis of the improvements that he had on his farm, he increased his soil organic value from a little under 2% to a little over 6%, which is a 3 times increase of soil organic value. And we talked about how the organic matter that you find in soil is a sign of how healthy or unhealthy your soil is if it lacks it. Additionally, he found that water infiltration increased from 0.5 inches per hour to over or around 8 inches per hour. So we live in California, and drought is a really big thing here. Water infiltration basically shows how resilient you are to drought and how much water is able to actually infiltrate and enter the soil and stay in the soil, not just fall out the bottom or fall out the side and run off everywhere. So to have higher levels of water infiltration is a good thing because it makes your farm more resilient. Additionally, he found that the soil carbon reached 96 tons per acre in the top 48 inches of his soil, which is quite a large amount, versus the typical 10 to 30 tons you'll see in various parts of the soil. So we talked a little bit about soil sequestration and how it's important to be able to store soil or carbon into the soil. So having a 3 times to a 9 times increase, depending on where you're looking at in the soil, he's having a significant increase of carbon being stored in the soil, which is better for the environment. Criticisms for the documentary include the fact that it kind of oversimplifies the climate science. It kind of presents solutions in a way that's like, oh, of course the solution was here the entire time. Why don't we just implement that? As if this solution implementation is universally easy to implement. And it kind of misleads the audience to believe that this complex issue of climate change has a very simple solution, which it doesn't. Soil sequestration is not the end-all be-all solution for climate change. It is just a potential solution. It is a piece of a greater puzzle. Additionally, the documentary doesn't really address the economic context for farmers who may want to move away from conventional farming. It just says you should move away from conventional farming because regenerative farming is so much better. But it doesn't talk about the financial or logistical challenges that may occur when you are going through that actual shift from conventional to agricultural or regenerative agricultural farming. The documentary focuses heavily on U.S.-centric struggles. It doesn't really talk about farmers that may live in less fortunate regions that may not have access to the things that people in the U.S. do have access to, less fortunate farmers that are living in other countries or third world countries. It has a limited use of soil scientists and focuses more on using celebrity cameos, which is nice to hear some people that you already know of talking about things. It's nice to know that other people in more fortunate positions are aware of the issues that climate change poses, but it detracts from some of the seriousness of the message, and it can come off as kind of inappropriate to hear somebody who is very fiscally well off telling me about how I just need to eat healthier, I should just eat a healthy salad, and I should just buy this, and that. It can be very easy for them to do that, but people who are less fortunate might not have the actual fiscal ability to go out and purchase organic food or garden on their own. So I think that they kind of fail to meet the less fortunate audience in this film. You might be thinking, well, I'm not a big farmer with a big farm, and I don't have the ability to, on a large scale, practice regenerative agriculture. But that's not the only way that you can support soil sequestration and also a healthy environment through healthy soil. You can support farmers that use regenerative practices. Every Saturday in Sacramento, there is a farmers market that runs, and a ton of local farmers come in, and they will sell their produce. You can buy your produce from there instead of buying it from the large scale stores that sell like a large amount of produce that has been driven from wherever, and you don't know where it came from. And so you can buy locally instead. You can join a community garden. I participate in the local community gardens in Sacramento. I personally go to the Brooks Trivet Garden where I have a personal plot there, but also there are communal plots that we kind of all get to work on together, and we all get to reap the benefits of not only creating and producing our own produce and sharing that, but also the community aspect of doing community service and actually participating in the farming, seeing what goes into it, and utilizing composting to create a healthy farm. If you don't have access to something like a community garden, or maybe you can't afford it, you can practice composting at home. You're able to get a small bin for composting, and you can practice composting your own food scraps and creating your own soil. And if none of that works out, you can always just educate yourself and educate those around you. Knowledge goes a long way for creating a healthy community.